Hello, guys. It is your good friend, the Movie Cuban, back once again. Thank you all so much for joining me once more. So, hey, have you ever wanted to pretend to be Ezio Auditore in Diablo 3? Are you tired of the old Demon Hunter builds that rely exclusively on bows and arrows and make you feel like you're playing Robin Hood or some stupid shit like that? Well, then, good news, guys, because we actually have a build now that you can not only do exactly that, but it's actually viable. So, the days of you playing this set so that you could just barely struggle through some of the content is over. And we're going to get into that today. So, with the release of patch 2.5, the Shadow Mantle set has received a buff in an indirect way. I what I mean by this is that the Shadow set itself, to my knowledge at least, did not gain any numerical buffs in the new patch. I know a lot of other sets got slight numerical tweaks, but the Shadow set is not one of them. However, with the change that happened this new patch, that really isn't necessary. And I'm going to go over that uh, right now. So, what changed in patch 2.5, you may be asking, is that this Holy Point Shot Quiver was given a legendary affix. And while some people think that may not be too special, let me tell you some of the things that went into the addition of this affix. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Holy Point Shot Quiver itself, the only significance it used to have was that it had a chance to automatically roll elemental damage as one of the main stat rolls. Other than that, it didn't have any legendary affix. There was really nothing special about it. So, unless you had an ancient one and you were trying to tide yourself over until you found another quiver for an actual build, it was an okay substitute. However, now in patch 2.5, this quiver has become exclusively useful for the Shadow Mantle set. And that is because the legendary power it now has makes it so that Impale throws two additional knives. And I know what you guys are thinking. Oh, what does that matter? Well, here's the thing. When the Holy Point shot first got its legendary affix, it didn't matter that it threw two additional knives because, as I believe Wudijo pointed out in his video during the PTR, the knives were not, upon first being released, were not being buffed by the Shadow Mantle set. So basically, yes, you were throwing out three knives, but only one of those knives was actually getting the 40,000% additional weapon damage bonus. However, now that they've retooled it and they fixed that, now all three of those knives that the Holy Point shot allows you to throw out gain that 40,000% buff, which makes it so that you can do a shit ton of damage. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, since we want to run Shadow's Mantle, you're obviously going to need all six pieces of the Shadow's Mantle set. Um, you cannot run this build effectively with a Ring of Royal Grandeur and five pieces. At least not from what I've seen. And honestly, there aren't any pieces of gear that really come to mind that you would want to swap out from this set anyway. So we're just going to stick with the six pieces of the set itself, and we're going to use other objects, or rather other items, both in our cube and equipped to our character, to give us the full benefit of this set. So in addition to our six pieces of Shadow Mantle, you're going to need the Chain of Shadows. This is basically the Shadow Mantle belt, which makes it so that you can vault for free for 2 seconds after you use Impale. This is going to be used so often because Impale is literally our only source of damage. We are spamming Impale all the time. So we're always basically going to be vaulting for free, which ties into another piece of gear that we're wearing, the elusive ring. Every time that you vault or cast shadow power or smoke screen, you take reduced damage for 8 seconds. So we're pretty much, with the rare exception of the few times we're going to stand still, we're pretty much going to be enjoying this damage reduction buff all the time. And that helps this Demon Hunter build with the inherent squishiness that the class has. So that's a really nice thing. We're also going to be running the Endless Walk set. 50% damage reduction while moving and 100% increased damage while you stand still isn't anything to sniff at. You know, that it is really helpful. I have definitely seen uh, moments running in rifts myself that this damage reduction and the damage bonus itself have come in great handy. I honestly wouldn't recommend running anything else for that. We're going to be running the strong arm bracers as our wrists, simply because of the knockback effect, increasing damage on your enemies. If you don't like this pair of bracers, unfortunately, I think you might be out of luck. Since we're not using a generator, and I don't know whether Impale, with the use of Carly's point here, would count as a hatred generator. So I don't think it would proc the Raps of Clarity. So you may just be stuck with strong arm bracers, and I'm sorry for that. Speaking of Carly's point, that is the dagger you want to run. This is the dagger that makes it so that your impale returns a certain amount of hatred if it hits an enemy that you already hit with impale. Since we're going to be spamming impale so lot and we have those three knives now, this is actually going to proc a lot. And your hatred is going to be topped up most of the time. For our legendary gems, you're going to want to go ahead and run the Golgok of Swiftness, the Bane of the Trapped, and Bane of the Powerful. The logic behind this is we're not running Bane of the Stricken because, for the most part, enemies just die too quickly, so you're not really going to get Stricken stacks on them. And ideally, the gameplay you'd be using for this build is you'd be impaling and vaulting around hunting for elites, so you wouldn't really be dealing with trash mobs. And so if you're going from elite pack to elite pack, you could pretty much get the excuse me, you could pretty much get the damage buff from Bane of the Powerful at all times. So that's why we're doing that. Golgok of Swiftness, this is just to help with some cooldown reduction. Um, so that we can pop back into Vengeance quicker, because Vengeance is needed on pretty much every single build for the Demon Hunter ever. But that's a different story. And then Bane of the Trap, just because, it's super powerful. So, for our skills, we're going to be using Impale's Ricochet rune. This is the lightning rune. This makes it so that each of your knives will bounce to up to two additional nearby enemies, so long as they're within 20 yards of each other. This helps it so that Carly's point will proc more often, because if you throw an impale and it bounces between two enemies, and then you throw another impale and hit those same two enemies, boom, you're getting more hatred from Carly's point. There really aren't any other super useful skills for this. Um, At least not if you're going to want to be running in the higher greater rifts. For Shadow Power, it doesn't really matter what rune we pick, since the Shadow's Mantle set gives us all of those runes anyway. The only difference that selecting one of the runes will do is it will change the color of the wings that appear behind you. You see those right there? So you can have fun choosing which rune you want to run and which color you think goes more with your gear and whatever. Then, of course, we're going to run Vengeance Seethe. This is so that we can get that additional hatred regen while we're in Vengeance. Since we are going to be aiming for like 100%, or at least as close to 100% uptime as we can possibly get. This means that we are going to be rolling cooldown on gear. We are going to have to do all that kind of stuff. But it's okay, because having this constant hatred source, in addition to the hatred regeneration that we get from Carly's Point, helps it so that we can continuously spam Impale without the need for a generator. In this slot, I will leave it up to you. I have marked for death Valley of Death chosen because I wanted to milk out a little bit of additional damage, and this is a great way of doing that, since enemies within this will take 15% additional damage. If you're not so much worried about damage output, but you feel that maybe your survivability is a little questionable, then I would recommend that you run Fan of Knives, and you can choose Bladed Armor, so you can get additional armor and help keep you alive. So, up to you. For Vault, we're going to pick the Rattling Roll rune. Usually, we would pick Tumble for the reduced resource or the reduced discipline cost, but because we're basically getting Vault for free because of our Chain of Shadows, there's no need for that. So we're just gonna go ahead and run Rattling Roll, and this is our knockback. This is how we're gonna proc the strong arm bracers. So we're basically just gonna vault into enemies, and then we're gonna hit them super hard while they take that additional damage. Finally, we're gonna run the Companion Wolf Companion. This is just so that we can get a bit of additional damage when we pop it. So that'll help us do a little bit more damage as we go through greater rips and all. When it comes to passive skills, I've been really torn about what I want to use. So I'll uh, I'll list two sets of passives. For this current setup, if you're running Marked for Death as opposed to Fan of Knives, then I would recommend running Ambush for additional damage, Leech for some more life per hit, Cull the Weak to increase your damage against slowed or chilled enemies, and then Awareness so that you can get that second life. Because once you get in the higher difficulty stuff, having a second life is basically mandatory. You're not really going to be able to get anywhere if you're getting one shot by everything. However, if you are using the Fan of Knives, then I would either swap out Leech or Ambush for Numbing Traps. Which of those you would switch out, I leave entirely up to you. In the Kanai Cube, I'm doing things a little bit differently than what some of the other guys have recommended. We're obviously using Dawn in the Cube. Excuse me. There's no other way that we're going to be able to get near that 100% uptime for Vengeance if we don't run it. We just wouldn't be able to roll enough cooldown on our gear to get anywhere near that without it. So unfortunately, we are stuck with it. In the armor slot, people like Riker and all of them recommend that you run the Aquila Cuirass. So that while you're above a certain percentage of your resource, all damage you take is reduced by 50%. However, I don't agree with that. I noticed a lot of times as I was testing this build to see how far I could go with my current gear and all. I noticed that I was dropping below 90% hatred a lot, which meant that in the most key times, I would find myself mobbed by enemies without the damage reduction. And that's not a good place to be. So, what I decided was rather than granting myself a 50% damage buff that I don't have all the time, I swapped over to the Visage of Goons so that Vengeance could have the Dark Heart rune, which, if you don't know, it's another skill that grants 50% damage reduction. And it just seems the wiser choice to me to have that damage reduction as long as you're in Vengeance, as opposed to having to constantly watch your hatred to make sure that you don't lose the Aquila Cuirass's buff. But that's entirely up to you guys. You can go with Riker. He's obviously probably a little bit better at this game than I am, with him being, famous and all. But I do like to think I know what I'm talking about, and I will say that at least for me, Visage of Goon seems to be the better way to go. And then finally, in the ring slot, we're going to run Convention of Elements just to give us that additional damage. Um, Between the Convention of Elements and Elusive Ring, you'd be running one or the other in the cube. It just depends on how well you have each of them rolled. Like in my case, I have nothing but really shitty Convention of Elements, but I have this somewhat decent Elusive Ring. But if you have a terrible Elusive Ring and a somewhat decent Convention of Elements, then it's perfectly fine to just swap those around. Finally, for our Paragon points, I would recommend dealing with your movement speed and maxing out your hatred first. Just so you can cast a few extra knives on the off chance that your Carly's point doesn't proc right away. And then just throw the rest into dexterity. You can throw some into vitality if you think you need it, but I've never really felt like that was necessary. For the offensive tab, I would recommend starting with cooldown reduction and then critical hit chance and damage, and then you can focus on attack speed. Um, they're all important in their own right, so I suppose it just depends on how many Paragon points you have, what you feel you can what you feel you can afford to put points in before other things, I guess. And in the defense tab, this is pretty much a throwaway. Personally, I start with resistances and armor, and then I deal with life and life regen. And then for utility, I go with resource cost reduction first, then do area damage and all that other stuff. But yes, so this is the Ezio Auditore playstyle. So I'm gonna jump into a Greater Rift 70 right now to show you guys a little bit of gameplay. If you don't want to watch the gameplay, if you don't want to see me scrub it up, then by all means you can go ahead and you can stop the video right here. I won't feel sad or angry about that. I understand not everybody wants to just watch gameplay. Um, but for those of you who do want to watch, I'm going to just run through a Greater Rift 70 real quick. Now, as a disclaimer, I only got up to rank or Greater Rift 68 before I made this build. So this is actually going to be the first time that I'm going to be running a Greater Rift 70 with this setup. Now, I'm going to try and not copy everyone else's gameplay style. I know I said that this set usually is designed to just go hunt for elites, and I might find myself doing that just for the interests of time. But do know that this build does enough damage that you could probably feasibly spend a little bit of time killing trash mobs and it probably wouldn't hurt you too much. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into that Greater Rift 70. And for those of you who are probably wondering why I automatically popped into Vengeance the instant that I entered the Rift, that would be because I am taking advantage of the number lock trick, which is basically you just bind a skill to your number lock pad, and then your computer will automatically cast that skill for you. And since I'm constantly popping in and out of Vengeance, it's just easier for me to make that auto cast. I know I do the same thing with like all of the transformation skills on characters, with the exception of the Wizard's Archon, because you don't want to be popping into that all the time. You want to pop into that only when you really want to pop into it. Oh, I hate poison wallers. There. Yeah. Give it osh. I wonder if I take the time to kill the minions if they'll give me any orbs. Sometimes they do. Nope. Totally wasted time just now. That's okay. Woo! Channel it! Holy shit! Ah, man. Gotta look out for those flame circles. Oh my god, so much trash! Now, see, I'm doing that very thing that I told you you shouldn't do. But I'm one of those kind of guys who I hate leaving enemies alive. Like, it's really. It bugs me when I don't kill things that I know that I can kill. So, here in, like, the 70s, you'll find that I'll take time to actually, like, kill things that most other people would just skip over. However, I will say once you get up into, like, the 80s and stuff, when you're dealing with mobs that just have ungodly amounts of health, that would definitely be the time where I would suggest that you, rather than taking time to deal with the trash, you would skip over them and just elite hunt. Oh no, totally lagging. There we go. But as you guys have seen, I have continuously vaulted throughout like a majority of this rift, and my discipline has not dropped at all from that. And before any of you guys go, but Josh, I saw your discipline dropping. Yes, yes, you did. But I've also been hitting Shadow Power a few times, and I was using Marked for Death. So, for the most part, if you're just impaling and vaulting, your discipline is going to stay maxed out pretty much all the time. Oh, excuse me. I do apologize. I am coming over a bit of a cold that I've been dealing with over the weekend, so I know my voice probably doesn't sound quite like normal, and I will occasionally engage in a coughing fit. I do apologize for that in advance. Hopefully, I'll be back to being hale and hearty soon. Stop throwing poison under me! But yeah, I just I just love throwing knives at my enemies. Like there's just if any of you guys have ever seen the movie The Expendables, you'd know that Jason Statham's character in that movie was like always throwing knives, and he was such a badass in that movie. So anytime I get to see like characters that throw knives, whether it's in like movies or anime, I tend to get really excited. So the fact that I now have a build that I can literally just roll around and throw knives at people, I am beyond stoked. And for those of you paying attention to my hatred meter, you'll see that it's very rarely dipped below full so far. Oh my. No, two elite packs. No, bad touch. Get away. Oh my god. Frozen pulses. People starting me on fire. What is this? Is this pick on Josh day? Frozen puddles. Oh, thank God, a shield pylon. Now I cannot worry about dying for a minute. Not that I was super worried about dying at any time during this rift. There were a couple close calls, but I kind of figured I'd be able to get out of them. But playing Demon Hunter will definitely test your reaction time. You have to know when to vault, when to get the hell out of dodge. Conduit. Perfect. And now keep in mind, I'm really only vaulting enough to keep the elusive ring procced. For the most part, you do want to stand still as much as possible so that you can get the full benefit of your endless walk set. And then when the Rift Guardian comes, as he just has, the single target damage for this build will make it so that you can deal with him relatively quickly. It will take more time since we're not running Bane of the Stricken and all, but it's really not going to be... Whoa! Where did I just get killed from? Did he hit me? Did one of the poison pools hit me? Or did he throw one of those poison spikes? Now I talked all that mad shit about how I wasn't worried about dying, and then I totally just died. That's what I get. Yep, and then I just vaulted right into his poison. I am a scrub. I am a complete and utter fucking scrub. Oh, God. Alright, kids, take notes. This is what not to do against a Rift Guardian. Do not vault into his poison affix. That is not how you'd want to do that. Damn it. because I was an idiot, I totally just cost myself the the fifth gem upgrade. Well darn. Well, that's alright. I'll power up Golgok first. But yeah, guys, when you're not playing like a complete idiot, like I just was, um, you can very feasibly speed farm 70 greater rifts without fear of dying. And I totally almost just closed that rift before I got my blood shards. Way to go, me. Ah, and then it autocast. Alright. Go back in there. Grab my shards. Back to town. But that is pretty much all I have to tell you guys today about the Shadow Mantle Demon Hunter. I hope you enjoyed me making a fool out of myself in a 70 Greater Rift. I do apologize for that. Usually I'm more on the ball. I think I'm just going to be a child and I'm going to blame it on my sickness. It's got me off my game, man. But, so yeah, 2.5 Shadow Mantle is very much viable. For those of you who enjoyed the playstyle before but were frustrated that it wasn't capable of keeping up with the meta, here is your chance, because now this build is very much meta. I've even heard talks that in Season 10 it could replace certain characters like the Generator Monk as DPS in a group. So, there you go. But I'm TheMovieCuban. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you enjoy my content, please go ahead and like my videos down below. That's always appreciated. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see me be an idiot and talk about Diablo more. And I hope that all of you have a very pleasant day.